And we're back. Good morning, everybody. I am Mike with Obviously Outdoorsmen. Welcome to First Light Talk number 6. You've tuned in for a very spontaneous topic today, and that is the balloon theory. I'll say that again, the balloon theory. And I'll deep dive into that in just a couple of minutes, right after this little article I'm about to go off on. Today's actually not an article. For everyone watching on YouTube, I'm going to play a video, and for the listeners, I'm going to play the audio. This audio and video is from TikTok at @great_outdoors_. That is the username. I'll play this video on YouTube, and again, play the audio on Spotify, or if you have no type of audio, I'll just play it for you guys. All right.
Anti-hunters harass hunter.
Because I eat them.
Why?
Because I eat them.
What does the deer do to you?
All right, you're on video. 'Cause I eat them. Do you buy meat from the supermarket?
Yeah, but we're not going.
You know they get killed. They get killed in dirty areas. Nasty, a whole bunch
This
of
is not a dirty, nasty area.
blood leaking. That's why I'm saying. That's why you don't want that.
You know, you're like a hero on Long Island right now.
What?
Because kids are upset. They're crying because you want to kill deer.
I'm
in a
sorry that they're
residential neighborhood.
crying. You need to explain to
How
them
would
that
you
it's
like
part
to
of
see
life.
it?
No,
Dead.
why don't you go, Luke? Get away.
Excuse me,
Do you
please
have a
don't hit
pet?
my car.
Do you have a pet?
Yep.
How would you like to see
You
your
don't
pet
like
dead?
that. You're
Deer's a
you're
pet?
real man. That you
How-
have to go out and hang out in somebody's neighborhood right
I'm
now.
not trying to do anything bad.
Why don't you go somewhere else?
Yeah, you are.
I'm not trying to do anything
You're
bad.
using a weapon to an alive animal.
Okay, and I'm gonna eat it. Instead, you let somebody
You're
else
not gonna
kill
eat
it.
Just
No,
tell
you're
me
not.
What do you mean I'm not gonna eat it?
Dude, we don't want to see it.
Well, then
Go
what are you
away.
hunting for?
All right, the guy is coming here on the way now. The officer is on the way.
I
Great.
don't care.
Okay.
Leave.
And you could have your cell phone on you.
Leave.
Hi.
Okay.
Yo, you're
Now.
You're really.
You're
got
an
issue.
asshole. Fuck you.
You're a hero. You're a hero.
Fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you. Asshole.
Now, that is just one great hunter harassment video. And if you heard, I'm talking about Long Island. That is New York. And them harassers definitely look like a bunch of uneducated New Yorkers. And there's a couple things that I think this guy did right and wrong. I mean, he kind of instigated it a little bit when he was like, I'm going to kill him and eat him. But at least he didn't get hostile back towards the hostile people. I mean, they came up out of nowhere, and that kid definitely needs some better education. And his grammar was great. He was like, "You're gonna use your bow to an alive animal," when you could just say a deer. Obviously, it's alive. And that's another funny thing that's going around right now. Instead of saying killing, a lot of young people are saying they're unaliving. That is an actual thing. I'm not just making this up. Yeah, search that up. Unaliving instead of killing. But yeah, these hunter harassment videos are always great. Maybe I'll sub in a hunter harassment video every week in place of an article once a week, because I just get a kick out of these videos all the time, because their arguments are just terrible. And you could tell this guy that was arguing with the hunter definitely was only a vocal argumentator. He did not want any type of physical fighting with this guy in any portion, because if this hunter got out of the car, I guarantee you this guy wouldn't have done anything. You could just tell in his demeanor. And as soon as he raised his window up, the other guy immediately started like throwing his hands up. He's like, "You got a big heart. You got a big heart." But it's illegal to harass hunters while hunting. I'm not sure if this would fall under that category because he's just sitting in his truck. I'm not sure what happened prior to this video, so maybe they started harassing him when he's walking out of the woods in his camo with his bow. Where it started, I'm not sure if it would fall under that category. But if people do harass you while hunting and it's purposeful, then that is 100% illegal. And if this happens to you, call the game warden and try and resolve the problem. I don't think calling the cops would do anything. If you just call the cops, maybe they could transfer you to the game warden's number if you don't know it off the top of your head. But I would just Google it. Whatever region you're in, just type in game wardens or fish and game officer for your specified area and just handle it that way. I've had a couple hunter harassment issues myself with other people hunting in New Jersey, sometimes hunting private property. The neighbors just do not like it at all. And I had a deer. I got someone on a deer and it died in the neighbor's yard, of course. And they came outside and they were not happy. They called the cops, and thankfully it was a cool cop. The cop came down the driveway and he was like, "You guys got permission?" I showed him my written permission, and he wanted to talk to the property owner, and she wasn't there, so I ended up calling the property owner. She was like, "Hey Mike, how you doing?" So he was like, "Okay." And then when he basically verified that I had actual permission there, he just started BSing with us, and he's like, "Hey, you get any deer here?" And this, that, and the next. And I was like, "Yeah." Well, I showed him all the pictures, and he was like, "Oh, awesome. My daughter just got a nice buck the other day." And it just ate up the neighbor that this cop was BSing with us and not with them, and trying to like throw us in jail because we were hunting near their property. And we ended up just dragging that deer off of their property and throwing it in my truck and driving on home. Because technically, if they don't want to let you on the property, so let's say so in this scenario, my deer died on the neighbor's property, and they didn't want to let me on the property to get rid of the deer. So they told the cops that, like, "No, he can't come on my property, but can you get rid of it?" And he was like, "No." So if you don't want to let him on your property to come get it, he has the tag for it. So if you touch the deer, if the neighbor touches that deer, she could get a ticket from the game warden because she technically is touching a harvested deer with no tag or license. And the cop doesn't want to deal with it. It is out of his jurisdiction, and he's not going to dispose of it. So if you got a mean neighbor in this scenario and they don't want to let you on the property, it's either going to rot on their property wherever the deer is, or they're going to have to let you come and pull the deer off of their property. But on to today's topic, the balloon theory. Now, if you guys have heard of this theory before, it is a hunting theory, and it has to do with the wind and where big bucks bed. Because the theory, or the written theory of the balloon theory, is essentially all swirling winds and all the winds in a specific woodlot will blow into one or two core areas in that woodlot. So if, let's say you just go on a scouting mission and you're walking through the woods, if you find balloons or concentrated balloons in a thicket or in a specific spot, a bowl or on a ridge line next to something, then that is where most of the wind will go to in that wood line. So a lot of times this happens when it's like two types of land meeting each other, so aka like a thick swamp next to a hill or a bowl or a cliff, just something like that, or a wall behind them. That's what creates the balloon theory in general, that the big bucks will bed near these balloons. I think it's just a coincidence. I think the bucks know where all the wind goes just naturally, and because they're old, mature animals, so they're naturally just going to go and bed there. And the fact that all the wind pushed a random balloon back into where that buck is bedding, then that's just a very heavy coincidence. So the balloon could either be there or end up in the ocean in a whale stomach or killing some type of animal in the ocean. I mean, it does make sense, the balloon theory, it blowing where it stops, like all the wind going to one specific spot and creating like a tiny like cyclone with all the trash that got blown into one circle, and then it gets caught on like a thick tree or bush. So it does make sense, and I actually have come across a lot of balloons in the woods, and I never really thought about it until I actually read up on an article that someone was talking about the balloon theory, and they really weren't even talking about it with informational aspect. They were just like, they took a video in the woods and they zoomed in on a balloon floating and swirling in the woods, and he just said, if you know, you know. So I did some research on it, and it does make a lot of sense for this theory to be an actual thing, all the wind blowing to one specific spot. And these bucks are going to be around that area. Even if there's no balloons there, we're just going to get off the actual balloon portion of it. But let's just say the bucks where they bed at this point. So I'm going to say the balloon theory, it has like 60% real, 40% like just possible, and even if it's not the balloon theory, it could be like the trash theory, because a lot of times not even just balloons but like plastic bags or garbage bags will get blown up and sucked in that same type of area. But for the bucks, their nose and the scent is their biggest advantage to staying alive out in the wild. That is their number one resource of staying alive. I mean, obviously their hearing is great and their sight is great, but their sense of smell is the number one thing keeping these deer alive. And a lot of times these mature bucks will often bed alone. So instead of bedding in a herd, aka like 3, 4, 5, 6 deer, to where they could basically just spread out and cover all angles of the woods to stay safe and stay on high alert, the big buck has to basically choose a spot to where he only has like 1 or 2 possible threat zones, if you may. So let's say he's bedding on the tip of a knoll that has a sharp cliff off the left side and a lake butting up to that knoll, and then out in front of him is just like a swamp. So if he chooses to bed up on that knoll, which is a very good spot for him if the wind is always coming across that, because if he chooses to bed up there and he puts his back to the lake and he points his ear to the right side and his other ear to the left side, and he could look straight out in the only threat zone that's really there, his ears are covering left and right, and his eyes are covering right ahead of him. So he doesn't really have to move. He could just sit there and soak up the sun, and he doesn't have to worry about anything. They choose spots that will be the least amount of threat zones as possible. And a lot of times with these mature bucks, they won't just get up and run away right away. So let's say you're walking through the woods and you walk within 20 yards of a bedded buck, but it's all thicket, you really don't see him. A lot of times that buck really won't get up at all, or he's going to wait until you walk way past him for him to stand up and just mosey on away to a new bedding spot. My buck this year in early bow for New Jersey, like early September, there's a long story to my velvet buck that I shot. It was a nice 6-pointer, really nice 6-pointer, my first buck I ever shot in velvet. And me and Billy were going out there and just looking for this deer. We had a lot of pictures on camera, and there's a long story to this deer that I'm not going to get into right now. But he was walking through, and he was walking right along a creek's edge. So basically the left side was a nice hill, and then he was in the bowl by the creek, and then the creek was right there, and then it was up another knoll on the other side. So he was going through this very thick thicket right along the creek edge, trying to bump out this deer, and he basically stepped on the deer. I was about 20 yards to Bill's right, and all I hear is ah, and then I look left and I see the deer jumping like 5 feet from him, running right away. And that deer basically let Bill step on him. And sometimes these big bucks, when they're comfortable, and not even when they're comfortable, if they think that you don't see them, they won't move. The same thing a fawn does for safety when it's first dropped in the spring or summer. So that's basically a survival mechanism that a fawn will use in the spring or summer when it is first dropped. It is dropped, it doesn't have a strong scent, so if a coyote comes near it or a fox or a human walks past it, they basically will not move a single muscle until you're touching it. Like, unless you touch it and pick it up, it will not move a muscle. And that's just a safety thing. So if the big buck basically does that same exact thing while you're walking through the woods and it is not moving at all, you could walk right past it and then that deer is just free to go. But if you turn and walk straight at it, that deer is just going to bounce because you're walking straight at him. I often tell that as a little pro tip. If you have a deer that's in the woods, especially during the rut where they care a little less about human activity or just activity in general, and they slip up a lot, if you have a deer that's bedded or standing there, instead of walking straight at it or stalking right at it, sometimes it's better to let the deer know you're there. And I know this is a weird one, but it has worked a lot for me, where you're trying to do a nice stalk and then you get within like 50 yards. You're 50 yards away from this deer. And then you step on a stick and then that deer picks its head up and it's just looking for you. It's just looking for you. It's looking for movement. It starts stomping its feet. And instead of it just turning and running, it's trying to get a smell and it's stomping its feet. And then if you move a single muscle or it verifies that you're a threat to it, it's just going to bounce. So sometimes when they pick up their head, you basically got to read the situation every time, but it's definitely worth a shot if it's already going to be blown hunt anyway. I'll stand up like out of my stalk if I'm 50 yards from them, and instead of walking right at this deer, I will bang a left and walk alongside this deer. So essentially, like, I'm acting like I don't see the deer. And a lot of times that deer will just stand still because he's like, oh, he really doesn't see me, so I'm going to watch him walk by me. So if you have a bow or a gun, you could basically walk alongside this deer, maybe creeping a yard at a time as you're walking alongside this deer. Maybe you gain another 10 yards, or once you're spotted, if you could gain another 20 yards out of a 50-yard stalk and you could get to 30 yards for a shot, it's very doable. I've done it. But a lot of times you're only going to get another 10 yards closer depending on the time of year. I've had times where I'm walking alongside it and it's the rut and I could basically walk out and just touch the deer. So it's a great tactic to use for that aspect. And I know we just went on a tangent here because we're talking about the balloon theory, and then I just went into the fact of deer not moving, but it's definitely a great tip to try out. And back on the balloon theory and back on where the wind goes, if you happen to come across the perfect wind spot, I would definitely drop a camera in there and make it a cell cam, so you don't have to check it all the time. You just check it from your phone, because I guarantee you, if you are just walking in the woods and you find, like, let's just say the balloons, and you put it on a heavy trail right in that area, you basically want a solid transition area from thick to open, or a sharp cliff edge to water trail. There's always going to be a hard, diverse platform right there. So the buck is going to be there because he's going to be bedded alone, and he's going to be close to food, water, or sometimes even does. He's going to be bedded close to all of that. So just get out there and look for the best buck bedding in your area. If you have a hill that has just like 8 does bedded on it, I guarantee you that he's not really going to be there. Another great tip on a great buck bedding area, if you have cattails in your spot or your woods, wherever it is, or even if you're shed hunting, if you have cattails there, and it's basically like a long, thin island or like peninsula that runs out into like a swamp or a lake or anything like that. If it comes out to an island at the very end or anywhere in that little hill run, I guarantee you that that's a buck bedding area somewhere along that hill, especially if it's surrounded by swamp on both sides, and it could just run that peninsula out to that island and maybe just get a little wet to go back into the main woods. I guarantee you he's sitting on that island because he can hear everything coming from the cattails, and for some reason, if he can't hear them coming through the loud cattails, if they're walking the same trail, he could just bed in a direction to where he could see the trail coming, and then he could just point his ears back to cover the other way of the trail. Bucks are very smart on how they set up, and deer are very smart in general on how they set up. If they catch your wind, you could just be busted altogether. Or if it's during the rut and you're using like a synthetic urine, not an artificial, a synthetic urine, and that wind carries that pee. It's piss. It's piss. I don't have to say urine. If that wind carries the smell of the pee right to the deer's nose, that can convince the deer to come in. And even if you're set up a little wrong to where it's blowing your wind and the pee's wind right to the deer's nose, a lot of times they're just, if it's the rut and they're really hyped up, they're not going to care. They smell that pee, they're going to come right in and they're going to be looking for that hot dough. But check it out if you guys are interested in this theory, the balloon theory. And there's a lot more research on it. I think there was a research done in 2020 in like February of last year on an article on this topic, the balloon theory. And give a look into it and let me know in the comments down below if you guys are listening on YouTube on if you think this is an actual thing or if it's just coincidence balloons end up in the same area as the bucks. Or let me know in the comments if you understand the concept of it and you think it's real, because I do believe it's real. I don't think balloons really have any correlation to where the bucks in general, because if a balloon just gets stuck on like a thorn bush, then it's not a great bedding area. But this is like a general rule of thumb that this is why Deer Society came out with like the floaters. If you guys are never heard of this, instead of using like the powder for wind direction, they have like floaters. It's basically like little pieces of like cotton type things. I've never used them, but I've seen them done a lot this year. You basically just take a little piece out and then you just throw it up in the air and the wind will carry it all the way through, like so you could see it from far away, and the wind will just carry it all the way past and see where the actual wind direction is going. So let me know in the comments if you think this concept is a relative theory, that if it's true or if it's not true, what are your opinions on it? And let me know what you thought about this harassment on the hunter in the beginning of the video. Let me know what you thought about that. If you guys think the New Yorkers are right or the hunter is right, or they're both wrong in general. Guys, let me know. Thank you for tuning in to FLT number 6. I am Mike, about to go hit the gym. I got to go make some coffee. I'm actually coffeeless for the first podcast I'm doing. I'm coffeeless. Got to go make my Black Rifle coffee. I am up. I am headed out. Tune in tomorrow for FLT number 7. I am Mike with obviously Outdoorsmen. Peace, guys.